We'll get there. That's the end of it, isn't it?
I'll get there eventually. We'll go backwards. It's much more fun. Right. Yeah. There we go. Everybody's considered okay? Yeah?
Yeah, perfect. Carry on, young man.
Okay. Royal Signal Museum and GB100RSM, which are permanent special events call sign. I should confess, I'm nothing to do with the military. My only claim to claim is 4 years in the Bournemouth School Cadet Force, where we actually visited 2 signal regiments, and everybody else went rushing off and jumping over fences and things, and I just disappeared into the shack at G4RS, and having just been newly licensed and running 10 watts, it was great to talk to the States as a highlight. But there we go. So 4 years in the Cadet Force, the rest of my life was in electronics. We'll get onto that in a minute. Okay, that's a picture of me in the shack there, which you've all seen. I know I'm a pretty handsome looking guy, but you'll excuse me for the moment. Collection of some of my old Morse keys. There is the one in the center at the back there behind the Junkers. Junkers is a 1901 Spark key. The one on the right is a GPO 1902. There's a mechanical bug there at the back. The radio station we also run at the museum is G4RS, which is the headquarters station of the Royal Signals Amateur Radio Society. There's a quick picture there. Right on the top of the big hill there, a couple of towers, full-size 80-meter dipoles, etc., and some nice equipment in there, so we use that occasionally. So there's the museum. Not a huge big museum, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours max. There's a lot of stuff in there, but it's selective. It starts at the sort of pre-Boer War and runs through up to fairly modern times. We've just got a new exhibition in there at the moment on the Balkans, where obviously the Royal Signals provided all the signals for the United Nations forces. So it's not a very big museum. It's a lot of stuff in there, old and relatively new, covers most of the major conflicts up to and including the Gulf War and Afghanistan. And there's a lot of interactive stuff, more interesting for the youngsters if they come in there. And one of the disadvantages of the Royal Signal Museum is in the middle of a working army camp. So to get in, you've got to turn up with photo ID, all adults. So it's not a casual visit. You've got to be prepared. It's not, you don't drive by and think, oh, I'll go in there unless you've got your driving license or passport with you. So we tend to go out, take the outreach team out, which is, well, I'm a member. So it's just a standard thing on the museum there, trying to highlight the modern communications. Now, back in the day, you could get a message by this system from Plymouth to London in 15 minutes. So they weren't sending Morse code or anything, they just had pre-arranged signals. So these were on all the hilltops from Plymouth to London. And actually one was at the top of the camp where you saw the G4S station. The claim to fame was one of these was there back in Napoleonic Wars time, 1805, in the back that situation. So Blandford's been a part of a national signal network. Morse code via a heliograph. The Royal Corps of Signals didn't exist until 1920. From the Boer War onwards, it was the signal troop of the Royal Engineers. But as they progressed, they realized they need more and more. So all through the First World War, it was the Royal Engineers Signal Troop, Signal Corps. The Royal Signals Museum, Royal Signals wasn't into existence until 1920. So this is a heliograph sending Morse code by focusing on the sun and flashing it. And the little key at the back, so you just offset it slightly. Record for this distance is about 67 miles in Afghanistan in the 1890s with a telescope either end. Very effective, very clear air, no moisture, no heat haze because it was so absolutely dry. So I'll just whiz through some of the exhibits in there. The only one left in the world, a mule-drawn line layer. We've actually got an old black and white film running in there where these guys are galloping out, there's a guy sat at the back there pulling all these cables out by hand, and then the person behind him on a horse with a hook rod picking the cables up and stringing it into the hedge so it's out of the way of everybody else. And it's quite, the guy must have had hands like leather, because he was just putting all that cable off the drum there all the way through, because this is pre-radio days, and so everything was by telephone. There's a mule lane there where they couldn't get into the big ones there. And of course, World War I dispatch riders, nice ancient motorbike. Looks about one of the ones I used to drive, but there we go. So it wasn't just signals, it was taking dispatch riders, and they're all part of the same signal carrying, message carrying service. 1930s mobile radio car. It's been moved now to make way for the Balkan position, but that was sort of on sort of VHF. There's a couple of guys in there. I'm not sure what the radio was. That's the radio in there, but I've not explored that one. It's just a sort of static exhibition item at the moment. And then we do make a fair bit. I'll just retract slightly. First World War, we have a lot of equipment there, cables. We've got the Morse code sounders, etc. that all came in, started with the Crimea War, where they laid cables from the UK across into Turkey and across to the Crimea. And so the generals suddenly found they had to be answering messages from London all the time, and weren't very keen on it because they were used to carrying out their own duties without interference from the politicians. So the engineers were involved in that. So I had line laying all the way through First World War, Earth return. So you just had one lead going down. Of course, the Germans realised if you had an Earth return, then you could plant a couple of stakes in the ground yourself and intercept all audio messages until the Fuller phone was invented by Captain Fuller, where everything was chopped up unless you had the equivalent set your end. It was just meaningless garbage, a bit like AM top band in the old days. Anyway, Second World War, SOE, Y service, largely staffed by amateur radio people, courtesy of the RSGB. But when we take them out, we show them this suitcase radio, Type A, Super Het, crystal control transmitter, in a case weighing about 15 kilos. And this was issued to the mainly female radio operators that went to France, and they had to sort of walk nonchalantly down the road, carrying this, pretending it was just full of clothes, etc. But 15 kilos is a fair weight, £32 in real money. We have a suitcase same size full of sand that they can pick up and see just how bad it was. And of course, as you can all appreciate, it wasn't a question of just switching on and sending it. The right coils had to be put in the PA. It had to be tuned in and tuned into the aerial. So it wasn't just a question of switching it on and sending a message back to the UK. The Enigma Machine, which most people have heard of, did, as I make a point of telling people, it relied on a big input of radio receivers all over the country, the WISE service. But Pat Hawker, G3WZP, was tasked as a schoolboy of 16, just finished school, just starting an apprenticeship at a solicitor's, and he was asked by the RSGB, the War Office, via the RSGB, to become a secret listener. And they were looking for 5-letter codes. And again, explain to people, if you miss a letter in the plain language on CW, you can put it in, get the gist of it. But if 5-letter groups, if you miss the letter, you've missed it. So these amateur radio guys were all peppered around the country and eventually drafted into the raw signals, so that they had to feed Bletchley. Bletchley was tremendously important, but it could only work on the raw material which was produced by the Royal Signals and by the amateur radio people that were actually drafted into the Royal Signals. And again, in France, the average life of an SOE wireless operator was 6 weeks. Agents were then faced interrogation, torture, and execution. They wanted the secret codes, so and the frequencies in use. And the Germans had very efficient VF sets, so you had to get on the air as fast as you could, send your message, dismantle everything, and get out of the way. And a lot of people didn't. And in fact, they were given a message. If they were going to send a message and they were captured, they were meant to make 2 or 3 specific errors, which would then tell the UK that they were actually sending us under duress. But when they did make these errors, back in the UK, it was decided it was just the fact they were under stress in the field. So for about a year, almost 2 years in Holland, every agent that was sent over was captured and turned, and the Germans actually operated the system and called it England Spiel, England game. And they were just asking people to come in, sending money in, sending cigarettes, anything they wanted, say, would you drop it tonight? And they lasted for about 2 years. And then in the end, the Nazis said, oh, well, thanks very much for your help. Goodbye, it's nice knowing you. They thought they'd been found out, but they hadn't. But this led on also to the problem with a bridge too far, Nijmegen, Arnhem, and the bridge trying to relieve there. The Dutch resistance, in according to the British Army, were infiltrated, were not to be trusted. And so they had no community paratroops at Arnhem, whereas in fact the Dutch water board their private telephone system was in the hands of the resistance, and they could pass messages, but the army chose to ignore them because they decided they were tainted. 19 set, my first ever radio, cost me, I think, £1.17 6. So you've got 2 to 8 meg transceiver, carbon microphone, grid modulation, so it's about 30% downward modulation. They also had the tank to tank 238 meg, which is a little acorn valve, and a AF amp for the intercom, so the driver could speak to the commander. So that was 19 set. It was used all over the place. The one I bought had made in Canada with Russian markings, so it went all over the place. It was used for in boats everywhere you could think of. It was quite reliable, 807 PA, on about 20-25 watts, and the variometer could match anything. That's the higher power version of the 18 set. It's got a big whip on the side, using Morse or AM. Again, carbon microphones, very poor quality, as you can well imagine. That was running. That would eat batteries because it's all valve. And so you had the LT and HT batteries, but that's still quite a heavy item. Excuse me. Field Marshal Montgomery's command vehicle, which would have radio aerials on it, and it would have the lines coming into it. So he had about 2 or 3 of these. This is the one in desert colours used in North Africa. A little bit more modern, come up to microwaves there at the end of the war. So that's a radio vehicle, complete again, complete station, bringing the radios will be, telephone lines would come in, and radio operators there will be matched over. A bit more modern again, Snowcat. United Nations, nice row of motorbikes in the background there. These are just odd snaps I've taken through rather than go through the whole museum, which really needs to be viewed as a sort of continuous item. So these are just little snapshots to give you a flavour. There we are. Loyal Voice of Ulster, 1969. Looks suspiciously like a top band transmitter that's been tweaked to the low end of medium wave. they give them a voice. And the signals equipment was all VHF, about 35, 40 megs up. And they had to go out and buy an amateur radio receiver from Lasky's or something similar in London, so they could actually DF this and track it down. We try and make it friendly in there, so there's plenty of things the kids and adults can pick up, telephone each other, send Morse to each other, set up like relay stations with lights. They get mirrors to try and get from A to B via different relay stations, set it all up. And the biggest thing with youngsters is they don't have no concept of any push to talk. They expect to pick a telephone up or a radio and just talk. The number of times they're saying, no, press the button to talk, let go of the button. And it's amazing youngsters don't even think about that. So there's a lot of interactive things the youngsters do in the background. They can drive in a simulator across country, protection flags, etc. There's again setting up a circuit there. Of course, they like to dress up. And the most important place is a cup of tea upstairs in the naffy there. If anybody is really interested, there's a book out, 100 Years of Raw Core Signals. And it's not a dry history, it's anecdotal, a lot of pictures produced by the museum director, Adam Forty, technical director, and very, very well worth reading. Special offer on the moment, but you can see on the museum website. I won't push that. This is not a sales thing. But if you're interested in the history of signals, and it's a very well worth reading book. This is my colleague G3WZP, who appears in the book, and he didn't realise it. He's on the left-hand side there with a big moustache in Northern Ireland with a big disc there. They were doing the state-of-the-art computers at the time. I taught him and G3WZP. They were 5 years behind me at school, and I caught them reading electronics books and ended up teaching them City and Guilds radio amateurs exam and Morse. Was out of contact for a few years, and he's come back now. He finished in these signals as a major, and he's now popped down and given me a hand with the trailer there, which we'll be coming on to in a minute. Right, so very quick view for the museum. Obviously, a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of sections devoted to different aspects of the various wars. And a lot of, there's obviously rows and rows of medals, which are really specialist. I mean, once you've seen, if you happen to look up something, we have an extensive archive service. So if you know somebody's worked, been in the Royal Signals, people can usually, archivists could look the world record up and tell you a little bit about where they were. It's, as I say, there's a lot in there, but it's quite compact. It's not like one of the large museums you just sort of, after a while, sort of glaze over. Right, pause for breath. Because, as I said, the museum's in the middle of an army camp, we have developed an outreach team. So we tend to go out to schools, county shows, etc. This particular one in front of us now was pre-COVID. It's my granddaughter's school on the left-hand side, sort of a 1930s school, modernised, and it was the 100 years anniversary of the first end of the First World War. We had a 2-day visit. We taught them, we had Morse code, so we have 10 sections they can send to each other in partners, semaphore, a radio maze where we strap a couple of VHF sets to them and blindfold one, they talk them through. And for the first time, we had an amateur radio station. And my colleague, not G3WZP, you've just seen, but G3WZP, had the Kenwood. We had a 40 and 20 meter dipole on top of the clock tower there. We had skeds arranged with Passchendaele and Ypres. And unfortunately, the noise level was S9 plus in the school. Plus, we were all in the hall, and the acoustics, the school halls, was so echoey that poor Ian was trying to listen to it, demonstrate it to the youngsters at the same time, and also all the electronic smog in the school played up. But they were really popular with youngsters. We did go around all through the Mediterranean and across to Russia, but we couldn't get into Belgium where we wanted to talk to the Ypres radio station at Passchendaele. But it was very successful. In fact, we had to work through lunchtime to get everybody in there. There was about 450 pupils got through in two days, and they were really keen on it. And this year, after all COVID settled down, hopefully, we're taking year 6, which is 10 to 11-year-olds, up to the museum, 90 youngsters, 10 teachers, and we're doing what I'm talking about now. We've got 3 classrooms, and we'll be going through some of the items there, and they're going to have a proper visit. And they study World War II towards the end of June, July. So last topic before they go up to the upper school. So it'll fit in quite well. But we can actually, that was the QSL card we had there. But it was very, very popular. So that was 100 years of the First World War. And then 2 years later, it's the 100th anniversary of the Royal Corps of Signals. So again, we applied for the special call sign, and this time it's a permanent special event station. So it was used just as COVID came in, and they relaxed the rules. So I operated mainly from here, my home QTH down here in Bournemouth. A lot of it, probably 75% CW. I wish I'd chosen a sort of slightly snappier call sign. Took a long time to send on the key, but that was the front of the QSL card. And I was pointing out to you the problem we had in the school was shoehorned into a space in the corner, electrically noisy, acoustically noisy. So my colleague G3WZP, who you just saw, said we used to have the thing called a fish fryer, which is this trailer, and it's got the radio equipment in there and line. So telephone lines would come in and then we send out on the radio. So just put the sides up. Why don't we have something like that? Of course, these are long gone because he was in the army in the 70s and 80s. So this is sort of on the back there. So they would just roll up, put the sides up, connect up the power, and off they would go. So thinking along those lines, we approached the Radio Communication Foundation and RSGB Legacy Fund to fund a trailer. So this now is in operation. We can take it out to schools or shows. It's completely self-contained. 2 main sponsors, RSGB and RCF. I approached Yaesu, ICOM and Kenwood. Yaesu said, of course, we'd like to help, and donated approximately 3 grand's worth of equipment. So we've got FT991A, VHF FTM 400 or something like that. VHF, UHF handy. The same with them. They said, well, you're on the coast, we'll give you a marine set and an aircraft set, because we did the aircraft Bournemouth Air Show. But we thought it prudent to get them to disconnect the transmit on the airband. I could see red arrows diving into the ground if some youngster picked it out and pressed the button by mistake. So MLS came in for a power supply, and Alphatronics used to be one of my main customers when I made transformers for a living, and they paid for all the aerials, etc. So it's all the equipment's in there. This came out right in the middle of COVID. We got the money through. So this is my project. I parked on mother-in-law's front drive, happens to live next door, and fitted it out. So takes 2 aerials in, so you've got 2 positions there. All those are USB and, sorry, not USB, individually MCBs, breakers on there, an emergency stop switch. So we take 10 amps, an emergency button there. You've got the 2 aerials there. You can switch between HF or VHF, UHF there. And that's on the front of the telescope Moonraker Fibreglass 8-meter mast. Just clip on the front there and extend it. And at the top there, we've got a full-size G5 RV, 40/20 stacked dipole, and a diamond 2-meter 77s. And I did try a band tenor, which I thought would be ideal because it would just hang it down from the top there without radials. And the only thing I can say is I got quite a few RF burns on it. Never really got to grips with it. I know people have used them and say they're very good, but it's there if anybody wants to use it. But we didn't really have any very good experiences with it. So just one of those things, it was handy to try. So these are the radios they've donated. That's the one I couldn't remember, VHF, UHF, dual band, and the marine and the air band. So Yaesu were very, very good to us. And they were up at Winchester, which is about 3/4 hour drive away. So welcomed them in and had a look at it, and very supportive. And last year, because we've gone to a couple of places, Bournemouth Air Show, one of them, with no power, the RCF and the RSGB Legacy Fund, we put a bid in, and we now own this LPG Honda generator. Reason for LPG is there have been a few, the Bournemouth Air Show, which is a big event, 750,000 visitors over 5 days, and petrol generators banned because there have been 2 or 3 small fires on the cliffs, and the fire brigade had a problem getting through the crowds to put them out. So it was either diesel or LPG, and we decided LPG was a bit cleaner. Also, this is just a list of what we've got in the amateur radio trailer. Self-explanatory. All sorts of things in there. I think you can go a few more skis, etc. And I've just modified the 991A, take the external speaker out, put a speaker on the front, and also an earphone socket so the operator can listen to the stations on the earpiece, the extension loudspeaker separate, so that whoever's doing the front of house can explain to people what's going on, but the operator can still actually make contacts. This trailer is stationed up there, and it's available to any radio club to borrow. It's only been borrowed twice so far because it's just getting word round. But if anybody wants to run an event, special event station, field day, etc., there's a shack on a set of wheels to borrow. No charge. We just want to see it used. We've got our name on the side, which is a good enough reason for using it from our point of view. So that was Ian again, G3WZP in there. This is when the unit was handed over. First 2 guys on the left there is the managing director and sales director of Yaesu. Guy in their sports jacket is Alphatronics managing director, RSGB president, and 2 guys from the MLS. The good-looking guy right on the side, stroking his chin, is me, and the small chap in the middle there is the museum business manager stroke technical director, Adam 40. And so this was just a handover. I'm not actually talking to anybody there, it just looks impressive. A few of the QSLs I've done there. Again, another shot there, so that's outside the museum. So we did size it on a 8x6 trailer. It's got a 5'10" headroom inside, and we put a bit of foam on the sliding door at the back. I've banged my head so many times. But we thought a 2-wheel trailer, there's a jack at each corner, so it can get in smaller spaces if you're trying to get into a field. We don't want a huge weight trailer. Right, so we go out to events. This is the Chalk Valley History Festival, which is between Blandford and Salisbury. It's on a farm owned by an author of historical books, whose name escaped me completely. He is very famous, I'll tell you that. But he's written a lot there, and the whole field is a nice little valley, and there's reenactors. There's a marquee about the size of a circus tent full of books. It's open Monday to Sunday. Monday to Thursday, local schools come round. There's lectures by various authors on military history, going back to Napoleonic times up to modern day, as part of the GCSE syllabus. And then we put it's a lot of interactive stuff, and we pride ourselves on hands-on. So this is just an overall view. There's the radio maze in front. This is inside. At the bottom end there, they're doing codes and ciphers. We work through different codes from the simple A is 1, B is 2, up to the much higher grade Playfair system. There's some equipment there, so all the phones are connected. And here's the Morse code table. They're sending each other in pairs. There's some teachers there looking on. I was missing here, so there's no picture of me in this one. I was being modest that day. But it's a 7-day event. It's very, very well organised. We get the heliograph working, etc. up on the send Morse messages up there. It's a really nice thing, and it's part of our outreach team. Further on, the first air show after COVID on Bournemouth Beach. There's our museum at 10, and we set a radio maze outside, all the Morse equipment's inside, but we didn't have power supply onto the beach. We had it on the promenade, but we couldn't run cables across the beach for safety reasons, hence the generator. So we were here on the beach in the middle of the military village, which is halfway between Bournemouth and Boscombe Pier. That's another view inside. And we're going First World War all the way through. And there's things that kids can pick up and send to each other, use the radio to the Klansmen, use Morse code, etc. And then opposite on the promenade is the modern army, the army cyber. They had virtual reality radio in the, equipment in there that you could show off. So there was guys either side of us with static displays, tanks, etc. You could sit on the tank, but you couldn't go inside it. You could look at some of the weapons they had, but we were invited again this year because it was so hands-on. As I say, in the 5 days, it's Wednesday to Sunday, and Thursday and Friday, it's the end of the August before they go back to school, and estimates between 600 and 700,000 people in the 5 days. And sometimes it felt like they were all going through our tent, because the only time we could stop for a break or go to the loo was when the red arrows were flying over. Now we were sort of stood outside looking at those. The rest of the time we're absolutely, that tent was sometimes completely crowded. Couldn't sort of move. This is this year's Chalk Valley History Festival, same sort of setup, but there's the radio maze. The guy on the left has got a small 50 meg set, and they're strapped on there. They're completely blindfolded. He's got to talk them through the maze there. Just another view there. But it was a very nice place. Another again, look inside. On the right-hand side is some of our sets to demonstrate DF equipment, etc., which I'll go in a minute. We've got a couple of little Wolford transmitter receivers we built in an MOD box and into a couple of biscuit tins. Not biscuit tins, the Yorkshire tea tins. Run about 1 watt, just under 5 meg on the MOD frequency, and one set up as receive only with a loop arrow, and we can send them out and they can send messages to each other, and then the guy with the loop arrow can DF them. And we've also got a little 50 milliwatt transmitter which just squawks on the right frequency, and they can DF that down, so we hide that, they DF that. So again, all hands-on items they can pick up, and not just listening to somebody talking like you are at the moment. So that was this year's air show. Again, same sort of setup. And again, you can see how busy it was in there. And this time with the generator, we had all the Morse items working, and the radio station was back on the promenade next to the Raw Signals tent. Again, we encourage young people to visit us. They did a museum, they did Morse code, these guides. But we had the trailer set up down with the museum in the car park, but it was a little bit electrically noisy. So we went up to G4S, which is at the top of the camp, which I showed you earlier. And then we used GB100RSM, so all the guides had to go on there. And the next thing they want to do is have a sleepover in the museum overnight. Don't know why, but that's the latest thing they want to try. So we're really into encouraging young people, especially girls, I say especially, but to try and encourage them into engineering, electronics, engineering. They want to join the signals, fine. But if they look at engineering and communications, we feel we've sort of carried out the job there. Through the summer, we've gone out to schools, we've gone out to libraries in the Bournemouth and Poole area. So we just done, usually just myself, but we've done Morse code and codes and ciphers. So they've been making simple code wheels, so 2 discs, A to Z on both of them, and you rotate them, say 5 rounds to look at A, and that becomes an E, etc. They send each one the code. These are some of the youngsters that I present there. I've done 1 a week for the summer, 2 in half term, and I've got another 4 to do next year. I actually ran out of time in the summer, but they were really, really enthusiastic. And the parents or grandparents were there with them. And I've been invited now to sort of do the same type of thing for the Civil Service Retirement Club and the NHS Managers Retirement Club locally, just to talk about Morse code and secret codes and ciphers there. And it's sort of spreading out. And this is probably, I think it's, I haven't counted, but it's either my 10th or 11th Zoom meeting on this sort of thing. This is the little set we built into a Yorkshire tea thing there. It runs about 1.5 watts. I did manage to get across to Brittany on 80 meters on the one I built here. So that's in the little set there. Back to G4S, brief history. And that's, we haven't got a paraset. So I'm in the process of making one. That's the transmitter portion. Runs about 5.5 watts, 6v6, a little key. The set I showed you earlier, the B2 set, it's an original, but because it's original, I can't play with it. I can't try and get it working. So we've decided to build a paraset and put it under Perspex and in a box, and they can actually look in and see lights and things happen. And we'll have to set it up again on an MOD frequency, so you actually use a transmitter. So that's just getting the circuitry working, and it's quite effective. And if I manage to cure the chirp, because if you work anybody with a paraset, it's a massive chirp because it's just a self-excited crystal oscillator straight into the aerial. A little bit of fiddling with bypass capacitors, I managed to get the chirp to be quite legible. So contact details there, myself and the museum. And really, that's it. A quick whiz through. It's certainly not comprehensive. There's an awful lot more to it than that. But now is the time to stop, because I can see 5 people falling asleep. I haven't mentioned AM once, so I apologise.
Well,
over to you, Simon.
No, so if you stop sharing, Geoff, that'd be brilliant. At that point,
here we go.
But I was awake. I had it. I was walking around with my mobile phone, listening to it when I was in the kitchen. So apologies if it was a little bit rude of me. But I personally enjoyed it. It's a museum I went to. Oh gosh, it's been there some years, hasn't it? So it must be 10 or 12 years ago, and I'd forgotten how good it was. But what I found particularly interesting in terms of discussions we've had with our local radio club up here is the engagement, you know, with the public, which we've failed abysmally at in recent years. And I might well be sort of taking some notes on board or watching that little portion particularly again to
well, we, as I say,